I'm honored to open the presentation, to invite for the presentation Professor Haim Koren, distinguished scholar and specialist in Islamic studies as well as Near Eastern problematics. So I hope that you will listen with interest as well as you will have some questions after the presentation. And let me express my gratitude to Professor Haim Koren and Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, for the cooperation with our university and giving the chance to listen to you for today. Thank you very much. You can begin.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. I'm not a professor yet. I'm only a doctor, so maybe in the coming future when I join fully to the university, maybe I'll come here. I only need, if you can, to put me on Google and then I'll manage. If you have, in fact, I need the Google Map or Google Earth that might help me. Thank you. I was asked to, many people still coming or people outside or? Okay. I was asked to speak about the Middle East and the connection to Central Asia. You belong to social studies or you have a
different schools.
Different schools?
I mean the School of Institute of Asia and Africa and Business School, as well as School of Mathematics and Computer Sciences and the School of Law.
Great. Fine. So
we are
combining. I'll try to refer not too much in depth in order to enable all of you to ask questions later on. And please feel free to do so after some kind of a presentation which will touch in the political science and history in our area. Okay. Thank you. Can you see there? Okay, fine.
We are technology.
I didn't use, decided didn't to use PowerPoint, only the map to give you some idea of the issue. Okay. We are located in the Middle East. We are, I mean, not only Israel, but our neighbors. And the Middle East for itself, it's a term that is relative, namely, it's a middle between something and something. So historically, the Middle East is the area which is, I do it here for you, which is the core of the Middle East, is from Turkey, basically all the way to Iran, back to the Iranian Gulf, the Arab Peninsula, Egypt, partly of Sudan, and that is the core of the Middle East. According to some foreign ministries, it's bigger Middle East or larger Middle East. That is coming from all the way from the west till that is your area.
Central Asia.
That is Central Asia. That's beyond the Middle East, but we're dealing with. Let me see. Okay, we coming to from India
basically till Mauritania, under Morocco. As you see here, that's a bigger Middle East. So it depends how you define it. When we say Middle East, usually we mean, in the research also, you mean
North Africa, all the way from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and Sudan, all the way to Saudi Arabia, in Iraq, Iran, and of course Turkey. That basically the Middle East is including the heart of the Middle East is Lebanon, Syria, Israel, and Jordan, which is here. This is the Mediterranean, and this is a connection between us and you through Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia up north, basically with the line of Turkey and Iran. That is the connection. That is considered in the literature out of the Middle East. So why we're talking about the Middle East and how it's relevant for you and for us? We're talking because recently we're facing some big changes occurred in the area, and some of them comparing, some of the spectators comparing the events in the Middle East to Arab Spring or to changes in politics in the Middle East and the world, and so on and so forth. Now, as a political scientist, I would also put an eye to define it as Arab Spring. As an historian, it's not really Arab Spring, it's a long process that we're facing now, part of it, that started much, much before. Started, in fact, in the finest level of using the media started in the mid-90s, but the beginning of the level started in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. That's the beginning of the shaping of the new Middle East. The issue we're talking about is not an issue of democracy or liberalism or pluralism, it's an issue of identity. And if you can watch carefully what's going today on in the research, those from social studies, you can see how important is the issue of identity and self-determination. If you probably know, this is the book of Benedict Anderson about imagined communities, following books of Huntington and some others, trying to redefine the structure of the world today. When I'm speaking about any questions, or please don't hesitate. If we're trying to define today the world not necessarily on the basis of nation-state basis, like Huntington, for example, state, namely, if we used to speak about a state like Georgia, for example, based on a very clear territorial dimension, and also about the identity of the people based on your history, legacy, language, and so on, you know the Georgian people living in the territory of Georgia using the Georgian language and based on Georgian history and culture. Okay, King Tamar, probably it means to you something that don't mean to somebody in Turkey, for example. It belongs to your heritage, okay? So that was the definition of the nation state during the 20th century, in the Middle East too. But today, due to the globalization, it starts to change a little bit, because the connection between people, states, in terms of economy, and sometimes culture, changing the definition of the identity of the people. For example, if I'm living in Petah Tikva, a small town in Israel, and I'm working in a high-tech company, and I have connections with a colleague and friend in Japan, in Australia, in Brazil, and in the US, and we work together through the computer in order to have products that will make money of it. Sometimes my connection with those 4 people around the world is better and stronger than with my neighbor downstairs, who living with me, speaking my own language, sharing my own heritage, because the field of knowledge that I share with those people is stronger than I'm sharing with him. Which means that changing the whole definition of nationality. So now it becomes an issue because advanced countries like in Western Europe or the US or Brazil or Japan, many people are working like that. And in underdeveloped countries, some in the Arab world, our neighbors, it's very, very different. But the way things are changing also your identity. So if we'll take it back a little bit to the end of 19th century or beginning of the 20th century, we're facing a big change in the world, based in Europe, changing the situation that Europe and the Middle East were heavily based on religion, and not on nationality, led by, for example, in Europe in the medieval time, by the Pope, the Catholic Pope, and by economical system of feudalism. In the Middle East, headed by religion named Islam, led by the leaders of Islam, who is Khalifa Rasulullah or a Sultan, and the inhabitants were defined by their religion. For example, if I'm in the 18th century, a peasant in the area of today is known as Syria, and I was asked, who are you? I would say I'm a peasant, Muslim peasant, that's working in the area of Damascus. That is my self-determination, not Syrian. That's a new terminology. If I'm living in the 17th century in what today is known as France, I would say I'm a Lutheran from Paris area. France, Syria, US, it's a new terms in that only in 200 years, that's all. Till that era of time, the world mostly were under religions and not under national identity of nation states. Okay? Let's go back to our area. Our area, this area that I marked before, was controlled from the 7th century till the 20th century by Islam. So if you're living in what today is Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, and so on, and you were asked, who are you? I see, probably you would answer, I'm a Muslim from those areas, or I'm a Christian from those areas, or I'm a Jew from those areas, and so on. Not Libyan, Israeli, Lebanese, and so on. That was not exist at the time. Why I mention that? Because if your self-determination dictates you to be part of a religion, namely, your leader is nominated from God, not by people. And if somebody, a sultan, or what called in Arabic Khalifa Rasulullah, is a leader, he obliged to give you instructions and you have to obey. And Islam, which is derived from Judaism and Christianity, shaped its nature to be not only a religion, but political, economical, military, whatever you like to call it, empire, which includes everything within. So in fact, the Middle East was under the rule of Islam more than 1,300 years. The relationship between Muslim and non-Muslim was very clear. Muslims were the rulers, non-Muslim had to be under Islam. That was very clear. I don't know if those of you who learn history happen to meet this fact before or not. No? But that for itself deserves 2 semesters at least to bring you the history, but I try to do it as short as I can.
So the Muslims were identifying themselves
Muslims.
according religion.
Religion.
Not
Very,
according
not
to
under
nationality.
anything else.
Yes.
Not only
It
that,
was from the Middle Ages.
from 7th century,
Yes.
when the Muslim Empire arose, basically, in the 7th century, when 2 other empires were in a process of declining, the 2 other empires in the area at the 7th century were, one was the Byzantines, probably familiar to you, what today is Turkey, and the Sassanid, also clear to you, today it's Iran, okay? The Farsis. So, when those 2 superpowers have clashes, young Islam raised up in the 7th century, challenging those 2 empires and actually building a new fundamental religion which based heavily on administration and self-determination of Muslims. I don't want to go too much in depth to this period of time because we never finish here, but what they did, they decided that Prophet Muhammad, unlike Prophet Moses, who came to the Holy Land but couldn't enter, just Joshua kept his way, and Jesus Christ then actually established a new religion when he crossed. Muhammad was the only prophet, monotheistic prophet, who led his religion, people, whatever you want to call it, for 10 years to success. So if he started in 622 and died in 632, in those 10 years, actually Islam decided to succeed not only as religion, but also as a political leadership. So in 10 years, he controlled the Middle East as I define it, from Saudi Arabia of today, the Arab Peninsula, Egypt and Sudan, this part, all the way up to Syria, including Iraq and Iran, in 10 years. No facts, no moderns, no anything. They succeeded to do it very successfully. So if those leaders of Islam at that time saw that in 10 years they are so successful, they thought that one day Islam will rule the entire world. This is called in the Quran in Arabic, Dar al-Islam. Dar al-Islam in Arabic is a house of Islam. That's a place that Islam should be. The house of, namely, the entire world. At the meantime, no matter if in 7th century or 21st century, when Islam is still not ruling the world, this part of the world, which is not ruled by Islam, called in Arabic Dar al-Harb, which means the house of war. Namely, in order to be ready to control the world, Dar al-Islam, at the meantime, we should fulfill a situation that we have a war on those territories which is not Islamic yet, in order to make them Islamic. Because one day, Islam is supposed to be the only religious on earth. That was in the 7th century. This ideology was shaped by the third Caliph of Rasulullah called Uthman bin Affan, and he brought it to the consensus or to the agreement among the Muslim scholars and later on by the Muslim community, the Ummah. So, if we're talking about a religion which is a globalized by nature, because one day they're supposed to be the leaders of the world, they have to organize all kinds of codes in order to have life, a daily life, with non-Muslims at the moment, till the moment that they will rule the world. So made a very clear contract between Muslim and non-Muslim in Jerusalem by Khalifa, who called Khalifat Omar. On his name in Jerusalem, there's a mosque in Haram Sharif, and he made the conditions between Muslim and non-Muslim, especially between Jews and Christians and Muslims. Jews and Christians, because the Muslim believed that the first who believe in one God, they credited by that, and they're not supposed to kill them because they were the first to believe in one God. That is Jews and Christians, called in Arabic Ahl al-Kitab. But at the same token, they called Ahl al-Zimma, namely they will be always under the rule of Islam, not equal to Islam, not above the Islam. Okay? That was the rule for many, many generations, many, many hundreds of years, all the way from, it didn't matter whether the center of Islam was in Mecca, in Medina, in Cairo under the Fatimite time, in Umayyad, in Damascus under Umayyad, and in Baghdad under Fatimite, or in Istanbul under the Ottoman. The principle are the same principle. The Ottoman were the last one, the last chain of ruling Islam in the world for the last 400 years that ended in 1980. So in fact, until the first quarter of the 20th century, that was the framework and that was the identity and the self-determination of the people who lived there. There was a sultan who was the leader of the Muslims. Jews and Christians should pay taxes as in a millet system, as communities, for basically what we call jizya and kharaj, which means poll tax and soil tax to the sultan, and the Muslim should take care about running the life of the people. That was self-determination. The big change happened during the mid-19th century when Sultan, and that's close to you, so you probably know what I'm talking about better than anybody else. The Sultan in Istanbul was called Abdul Hamid II. He was a very bad Sultan, very weak Sultan, and the Ottoman Empire came to be seen as being in a decline. Young Turks or young Ottomans who went to bring modernization to the Ottoman army went to Paris to learn there, and they happened to be in Paris during the Spring of the People, 1848, and during the French Revolution, and they lived there. So they were affected so much from the principles of the French Revolution that they came back to Istanbul bringing those ideas with them. They didn't care much about equality and freedom and so on. They care about self-determination, because in the French Revolution, for the first time, people started to talk about bringing or having nation states based on territorial dimension. They came back to Istanbul with those ideas. They decided to have a group that will change the self-determination of the Ottomans, and they will try to move to be Turks, not Ottomans. That means, which is very significant, not taking care anymore about all these areas, but concentrate on the area between the Taurus and the Pontus, which is big enough, but being Turks, instead of being based on the heritage of Islam, coming back to the tradition of Haran and Ararat and so on, and neglecting the Islamic faction in their identity. It doesn't necessarily say that they stop to be Muslim, but Islam won't be the main component in their identity. That was the revolution of the mid-19th century, beginning of 20th century. So by the time, and historical process takes some time, by the time they moved to 1908 to be defined as young Turks and make the revolution 1908, 1918, end of World War I. Question? You can ask, don't worry. So 10 years between 1908 and 1918, end of World War I, was critical for defining modern New Turkey. In the meantime, Mustafa Kemal, who were hero of the war of Turkey, joined those young Turks, and they decided to have an elite that will change totally the face of the Ottoman Empire, and they decided to have a modern new state, revolutionary state, not based on Islam, based on modernity, with the famous 6 principles, etatism and so on, and totally ignore Islam as a main component there. That's important because if for 1,300 years people define themselves as Muslim, and the Turk who led Islam in those formative years decided not to be Muslim anymore, so all these people here should ask themselves, if our leaders, so many years, so many hundreds of years, are not our leaders anymore, so who are we? We are not Ottomans, we are not Georgians, we are not Kurds, we are not Bulgarians. Who are we? So by the way of elimination, they came to the conclusion that if they are not Turks, and not Persian, and not Kurd, they're probably something else, namely Arabs. What does it mean, Arab? Arab means somebody who was born speaking Arabic language, based on Arab heritage, but not necessarily on Islam. It's true that most of the Arabs are Muslims, but they are not based on their identity on Islam, but on Arabism. So in the 20th century, if you have questions, ask. Don't worry about it.
About Arabs in the Middle Ages, the term was a common defining the cultural heritage of Muslim world. So it's quite interesting that the Persian term...
Serbs are Muslim, but not Arabs.
The term Arabs,
Yeah.
which was the common name of Persians, Turks, who were intellectuals creating the cultural heritage
That's true.
of Muslim world.
That's true,
So
because
it's a very common term from the beginning of the Middle Ages. I mean, not Middle Ages, but maybe from the 8th century,
8th,
when
9th century.
civilized
Right.
and other
but you're aware to the
intellectuals
fact
were-
that
yes.
even in the historical discourse
Yes.
of the 9th, 10th, 11th century, when Arab meant Islam, because as I said, Islam came from Arab Peninsula by Bedouin, by Arabs,
Yes, that's
and
right,
it
that's
moved
right, yes.
and it moved to Persia.
Yeah.
They called Persian, called in Arabic Al-Arab wal-Ajam. Ajam is not Arab, is Muslim, not Arab, Persian, in other words. And Turks also, they are Muslim but not Arab. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Arabs base their heritage differently. So that particular process came to the Middle East very early in 20th century of the 20th of the 20th century, basically in Beirut. They defined themselves as Arabs, not Muslim anymore. So that changed the whole self-determination of the people, but they defined themselves not just Arab, but all Arab, pan-Arabs. So they took from the Islam the component of globalized determination as Arabs, not referring to the territorial dimension. I'm an Arab. But in the mid-30s, due to the fact that Britain and France ruled the Middle East, they wanted to proceed towards a situation that they could have nation state in the area. So it's not enough to be Arab. You have to be very specific Arab. You might be a wonderful Arab who's living in Syria, but your interests are different because of geopolitics from your fellow Arab who's living in Egypt.
Yes.
We are both truly good Arabs, but it's not the same. So that was a second definition. So any Arab has at least two identities. What we call in Arabic Qawmiya, that's the Pan-Arabism, and the nation-state Arabism. I'm an Arab Syrian, I'm Arab Egyptian, I'm Arab Libyan, and so on. And that crossed the 20th century. In other words, we're moving from a situation that was a contentious crisis for the people here, because mentally, that was not less than a revolution to define yourself so differently from what you used to be before. So what they did, they moved fastly to be from Muslim Arabs and from Arabs, Syrian Arabs and Egyptian Arabs, and all them less than 100 years. And in the end of the 40s, people in the Middle East started to get nation states, namely Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Egypt, and so on. Very fast process. Now, on those processes, those who decided to take the lead for having new states in the Middle East were basically military officers that used to be from the time of the Ottomans, leading their society, getting into power, and later on trying to make it, to establish it as a civilian one, like in Syria, like in Egypt, after some revolution. In Syria in 49, 3 revolution, in Egypt 2 revolution in 52, in Sudan in 65. So in fact, all the new Arab countries, either they were military officers who became prime ministers, presidents, after they didn't use the uniform anymore, or monarchies that came on with the same process, like Saudi Arabia, the Abdul Wahab from the 18th century, or Jordan or Morocco, that the Sharif dynasty, which goes back to the Prophet, or Jordan, Sharif Hussein from Mecca. So that was actually the two forms of ruling in the Arab world. So what we have in the end of the 40s, beginning of the 50s, a long tradition of the people who are living in our area, the Arabs, who never ever faced a situation of pluralism, democracy, freedom. They never had the opportunity to be in that situation before. A totally new terminology for them. Is it clear? I'm talking about 1,400, 500 years. The only modern place in the Middle East that the Arabs are democrats, can vote and be elected freely, is the State of Israel. We have 20% Israeli Arabs, or Arabs who live in Israel, who are Israeli citizens. They are the only Arabs in the Middle East who can vote and be elected freely. No other place in the Middle East. Maybe Arabs who are living in Europe, but not in the Middle East. It's absurd, but that's the situation. Okay? Let's move on. So, when people in the world, in Europe or America, speaking about the Facebook revolution, that means that in 2 days, in 2 months, people get to know the Facebook and the internet, and all of a sudden everything is changing now. And Egypt going to be a democracy, and Libya is going to be a democracy. That's a little bit too far. Because in history, as you know, processes are taking a long time. And a process to be a democrat, it's not only a state of mind, it's a long process of education. Now, the issue in the Middle East of taking the modernization from the West, but not taking the values of the West, is not new. It was under the Ottomans, it was under the Persians. The big debate among modern scholars in the end of the 19th century were whether to adopt also Western values or only the modernization and keep the Arab and modern values. The answer is very clear. To adopt the modernization, not the values. It's very clear. And that goes along the 20th century when President Mubarak of Egypt used to speak with president of the US, not only with Obama, but with Bush, he used to tell him, stop preaching to me about democracy. It's not good for us, it's good for you. It's your values, it's your background, it's your culture. We have a different culture. You have to respect mine, because if you push me to be a democracy, it can be counterproductive. It will take the opposite. That's important to understand. I put it in that perspective in order to give you some historical view about how things were developed in our area.
Eastern democracy is limited democracy.
Very limited.
2 hours or 1 hour.
And in order to, you know what, I go even farther more. We haven't, we're facing now basically a third, sometimes fourth generation of Muslim immigrants in Europe. We can find them in Holland, in France, in Belgium, in Britain, and so on. The first generation came in France. They are in large number, 10% of the population. In the beginning, they came from North Africa, tried to get jobs in Europe. They were grateful for having the opportunity to have jobs. Second generation were born in Europe and started to go to the educational system, the European educational system. And third generation said also, sometimes speaking mother tongue, English or France or whatever, and they supposed to be good citizens in their country, they felt like discriminated against, bitterness, not identifying with their own new countries, those who were born there and their parents were born there. And most of them, as polls have been shown very clearly, becoming more and more radical inside Europe, in Britain, in France. I tell you even more than that. The most radical thinkers in the Muslim world today are not in Saudi Arabia or in Afghanistan. They are sitting in France and in London. So even if this culture living in democracy, it not necessarily means they adopt the principle of democracy in a democratic society. You can have few examples. The veil in the Supreme Court of France, the story with the churches in Switzerland, when the Switzerland rejected the will of the Muslim to have higher mosques, the story with the cartoons in Denmark, and so on and so forth. So even if the culture going out from its area in the Middle East, it's not necessarily saying that they are Democrats. They might use democracy for their own sake. It not necessarily says that they'll become Democrats. It might be there are many communities who adopt in France or in Holland the democratic notion, but not necessarily all of them, but definitely not in the Middle East. Okay. Now, since we are living in that kind of an area, and since you, whether you like it or not, becoming part of our area, because the Middle East and Central Asia are very close, as you can see, and the continuation from Turkey between Turkey and Iran to you, it's through you, Azerbaijan and Armenia. Those are the lines that connecting us. And because of the geopolitical picture that's shaping right now, you're becoming also part of the game now. I tell you why. Turkey and Iran, we said, were two empires, Muslim empires in the Middle East, but not Arabs, right? But as I say about Byzantium and Sassanide in 7th century, you can read the news today every day and see that Turkey and Iran are very important players in the Middle East now, in the Middle East and Central Asia. Okay? Now, when Libya has its own problems now with Gaddafi, and the West is afraid that they stop to produce oil in Libya, the West is including Turkey, because Turkey is a big client of Libya, Turkey immediately moves its eyes where the alternative to get the oil. The alternative is here. Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, gas, oil, and so on. So in a way, Iran, which is bordering of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is located between Iran and Russia, from south to north, producing a lot of oil and gas. It's also a target and a brother of Iran, and still compete Iran in producing oil and gas. Now, when Turkey decided to have its policy towards the Middle East, and that happened basically a decade ago, to change its policy to be more involved in the Middle East, that means also in Central Asia. In Turkey, in Iran, in Moscow, in China, they refer to that area, to your area. Your area is not only the Caucasus, but also Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, all those countries in Central Asia, as the new Silk Road of the 21st century in terms of gas, oil, and politics. So it's not coincidence and not surprise, it's all involved in places or still involved. Turkey is moving fastly because Turkey has natural hinterland here because of the language. People in many countries speaking any dialect of Turkish here, more than Iranian, more than Farsi. Farsi is less than Turkish. And the fighting between Turkey and Iran is going not only about the Middle East, but also about Central Asia. And that is supposed to be very interesting in the future. How they connected to the Middle East and to the situation right now. Egypt is in fighting for changing the constitution, having new institutions now, and so on. Libya is fighting from the survival. Libya is a tribal society. Gaddafi is he's the head of the biggest tribe in Libya, which live in coalition of another tribe, and actually it's a tribal society as much as in Saudi Arabia. Jordan is a country that bordering us, problematic monarchy, descendants of Prophet Muhammad, and still most of its inhabitants are Palestinians.
Yemen also tribal.
The tribal Bedouins are supporting the king, the Palestinians becoming the majority there in Jordan. And to be stuck between Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the Palestinians, it's not a big deal. The Jordanians are strictly afraid being there. To my mind, the survival of Jordan up till now, because of the maneuvering of King Hussein, who was very smart, it's a miracle. You know, once we had a prime minister, a lady named Golda Meir, and he said, Israelis, a Jew, who doesn't believe in a miracle is not realistic. So, Jordanians also believing in miracles and realistic. In the meantime, they succeeded to preserve their country with a very good alliances with us, strategic alliances, and we have a trouble, both of us, with the Palestinian, which is a different story. Turkey, Syria, to my mind, is a cornerstone of the situation right now, because Syria, as I mentioned before, has military officers making coup d'etat, and they took power very early. Hafez al-Assad made a revolution in the 60s, 66 or 65, and replaced by his son, after making the revolution, Bashar Assad. The population in Syria is problematic. We have 12% Alawites that Assad belonged to, who controls more than 70% Muslims, brutally. His father in 1981, killed in Hama 20,000 people with tanks, with everything. In that sense, his son doing the same now, but his father was martyred. He knew where the red line is, where not to cross, and he actually fighting for his life. Because if Assad fails in Syria, that means that the majority of the people there will slaughter the Alawite minorities, because they are so hated after brutal controls after so many years. So the fight of Assad with tanks, with helicopters, with airplanes, with his own people, is a fight for his life and for his minority group, fellow minority Alawite group life. Now Turkey, when it decided to change its policy, I'll explain in a minute, based its policy on countries like Libya and Syria. Libya for the oil, Syria, because Syria is a cornerstone in any access in the Middle East. Turkey and Syria was almost enemies for many, many years, because they have troubles with the Kurds, and also after Lausanne Agreement 1923, after World War I, it was decided by international institutions that the border between Turkey and Syria will be in a place called Hatay by Turkey and Alexandrata by Syria, and that's supposed to belong to Syria. But the Turkish said, we don't give a damn, and they took this area, which is full of water and good soil. And the Syrian wanted it back, they never had an opportunity to get it back. A few years ago, more than a decade ago, Erdogan decided to go to agreement with Assad, because Assad is heavily dependent on the water of Syria, of Turkey. I think some of them get it from here, the water I mean. And
waterfalls.
The waterfalls, yeah. And the high dam that the Turks built between them and Syria, one summer they decided to stop the water to Syria. So all people in Syria almost was dying. They begged to Turkey to open it, and Turkey came to agreement with them about the water and the Kurds, and they became allies. Now, Turkey, with economy, had an aspiration to be part of the European Union. European Union refuses to don't enable Turkey to join European Union. So Erdogan was insulted and decided to go east, to go to the Middle East.
And Cyprus.
Cyprus, the Kurds, that are the difficulties that the Europeans trying to make for Erdogan. So now he moved forward to the Middle East based heavily on Syria. Now Iran used the opportunity of reunited the Muslims after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, working on the issue of Islam against Israel and the Jews, gaining support from those Arabs who are against the Jews. Now Turkey would like to sing the same card. What's happening now in the Arab world prevented from it, because they don't know what will happen with Syria. If there will be a situation that Syria will be a kind of cornerstone between Iran and Turkey, probably Turkey will be profitable, because most of the inhabitants in Syria are Sunni Muslims, and Iran are Shiite Muslims, and that's why it was so easy to Iran to be in alliance to 12% Alawites in Syria who are not Muslim. Now we'll see how it will develop. That kind of a background. I can speak a little bit more, but I would like to open the discussion for you in order to move me to the direction that you like, not that I would like to tell, because I can stand up and speak till tomorrow. So please ask me the questions that interesting you in those locations, and I'll try to do my best. Thanks.
Yes, please.
Just one question regarding the Turkish revolution. So, as great a reformer as Kemal Pasha was, he did not abolish Sultanate and Caliphate at the same time, right? So, Abdul Hamid was the last Sultan, but he was not the last Caliph. So would you please elaborate
Right.
a little bit
Good
on
question.
this?
Thank you.
In other words, what was the what was the transition period?
Thank you.
Having the caliphate but no more the sultanate.
I decided, after so many lectures, I decided to make it short, but you bring in the right point that I have to elaborate on. The question is very good. It's asked about the role of the Sultan as in Turkey, as a Sultan and not as Khalifat Rasulullah. Khalifat Rasulullah, it's a term, it's a title that every leader of the Muslim community brought with him after the death of Prophet Muhammad. But Sultan was also Khalifat Rasulullah. They used the term Sultan because it was a Turkish culture. They used it, but it was. So what happened in 1918, Ataturk cancelled the Sultanate. Abdul Hamid II was not there anymore. But the worst thing that he did, in 1924, he cancelled the Caliphate. And that is a good point. Why? Because when you cancel the Caliphate, and Ataturk was originally Muslim by religion, by birth, not practicing Islam. But when a Muslim stopped the idea of Dar al-Islam, of Muslim empire, actually he completed the story of Islam on earth, because the system moved from a Muslim empire to a system of nation state. That's why all the radical Muslims hate Ataturk, because actually he cancelled the Islam at the time, the Islamic empire. Now when Khomeini wrote his famous book in '79, was published, Hukuma al-Islamiyya, the first principle he stated in his writing was to bring back the caliphate as a first principle. When any radical Muslim today speak about against nation-state system and bringing it back to Muslim empire, he speaks about reunion or renewing the caliphate. That was the first, before anything else, because Ataturk destroyed it. And they against the nation-state system because it ruins the role of Islam that it used to be up till now. That is a very important point. Now, when radical Muslims assassinated President Sadat, for example, they blamed him with many blames, but one of them was that because he is a leader of an Arab country, a nation state, he's disturbing them to establish a new Muslim empire, and they are disappointed. They thought he is a Muslim, as a Muslim, will promote a Muslim empire, and instead he did the opposite. So they have the opportunity, Muslim, to kill Sadat as an infidel. That's very interesting. That's the thinking that developed out of the story. So that's why the role of Turkey and the Ottoman Empire is so important in the history, in new history of the Middle East. Yes, please. If you have, please.
I have a question. As I understood from your lecture, it's, you consider democracy in Egypt or Arabic countries almost impossible.
No, I said that up till now,
Yes.
they didn't have an education for democracy. In order to establish a democracy, you need a long process of education. Yes.
Yeah, but if you take example of Turkey, they also like made radical changes and not for quite short period they have democracy there, right?
No.
So there is no democracy in Turkey.
No, Turkey is a democracy.
Yeah.
In a term of, they're much more democrat than
And that's what
Algeria, no question about it. But Turkey, modern Turkey,
Yes.
was established by Ataturk, is controlled for many years by the army. The army in Turkey are in charge of the nationality of the people. If somebody moves out from the principles of Ataturk, you remember the revolutions of Suleiman Demirel and some others during the year. So it's not the democracy that we mean. Erdogan is very smart, and he uses this. He said, you see, I want to bring it to full democracy by moving the army out of the game. What he doesn't say, but he does, he actually bringing his faction of Islam to a different path. But Turks are not Arabs. There are growing publics in Turkey that are totally westernized, if I could say so. To my mind, half of the population is very advanced people that want democracy for many years. And the fighting in Turkey is very different from the Arab countries, because Turkey is much ahead of the Arab. Turkey is much closer to Europe in definition of democracy per se. But still, Turkey has extreme problems with human rights, with the army, with the Kurds, which not put that as a real democracy as we mean. It's true that they proceeded to better elections, to a better party system that it used to be, but it's still not a democracy. Now, what I'm trying to say, why those people are afraid from Erdogan, because Islam in Turkey, basically, is a different path of Islam. It's not Islam that you find in Saudi Arabia. It's true, you're supposed to know better than me, because you're a neighbor, that you know that basically Turks today are coming from a very different path of Islam, which is based on popular, Sunni, very mild Islam. If you can, in December, you can go to Konya to see the tomb of Jalaluddin Rumi, and you understand what does it mean, the Islamic Turkey. It's not Bin Laden, definitely not. It's not Egypt. It's different Islam. You can manage with this Islam as neighbor, as a Christian neighbor. No problem. Erdogan is more connected to factions of radical Islam, of the Middle East. That means that he's closer by that to Arab Islam than Turkish Islam. I know that his mentor, Fatahullah Gulen, who living in the US, was very angry at him because he told me before the election, it's not the way I educated you for. So it's a different path of Islam. I don't want to go too much into depth with that, but Turkey definitely has the opportunity to be part of the modern world. There's no question about it. It has the ability. They have, the people are educated, and they have the, and Turkey, it's under a big change, not only economically. And Turkey was always a regional superpower. There's no question about it. So it depends where Erdogan wants to take it. To take it back to, as the Arabs said, to be a neo-Ottomanist, like his foreign minister trying to move all the time, or to be part of your area and to cooperate with other countries here for the sake of improvement of your economy, for example, too, or Azerbaijani economy. I don't know. Armenia is a problem with Turkey, I know that. But in spite of the fact they signed an agreement recently, but still, Turkey, it's a power that you cannot ignore. I agree, but it's still not a democracy. Yes?
Well, may I?
No, of course.
What's about possible development? I'm interested in Egypt, the situation, and you know that maybe by the name of democracy, Muslim radicals may be united and we can have the chance to win the elections.
You know, it happens one in Algeria, remember?
Yeah, in Algeria.
And the West came out and against it. The Muslim Brotherhood, who founded in Egypt in 1928, are well organized, better than anybody else in Egypt. Okay? So if anybody would like to take control, they will do it. But you hear me, or I need this rock star
Yes.
Yes? Okay, fine. Madonna. Egypt, they are very sophisticated, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. They declared that they won't run for presidency, but if anybody organized in Egypt are the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, Mubarak succeeded to, and that of course reflects on us immediately, because the relationship of the Hamas, who are also a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza, that became more and more extreme, they well organized, they might open the door between, I hope I'm not disturbing, or if you have a question, please do. If they have the opportunity to take control first by the grassroots, through education, the old path of the Muslim Brotherhood, by education and gaining more and more power, they will wait patiently till not this election, maybe next election, they will get control on Egypt. But at the moment, as if the army running the state, and if, for example, Amr Musa will run to the presidency, and you check carefully the people who are running for presidency, they all belong to the old establishment. Amr Musa, even the head of NASA, Baradei, before, who never was president in Egypt in the last 30 years, you don't talk about those who demonstrate in Tahrir Square that running to presidency. It won't, because we need somebody who will succeed in containing and running the country. And at the moment, the Muslim Brotherhood cannot do it. And they heavily depend economically, Egypt, in the US, in Australia, in terms of having to import even wheat every day, and sugar. They need badly the rich countries to do it. So, I don't know, they declared recently that they will open the way from Egyptian side to Gaza, and they retreat. They don't really want to do it because they see there are problems. They said that they will renew the relationship with Iran. It's not going well. It's not working. They see the reality, it's not very easy. Some of them calling to cut the relationship with Israel. It's not working. They need us because geostrategical relationship that we have in our area. So it's too early to analyze, but I assume that even if they pass a constitution, which is pretty problematic, and go for election and having a new president, it somehow they keep on cooperating with us because they understand the consequences. The relationship between Egypt and Turkey, for many years, not only now, suspicious. They don't trust each other very much. So with us, we have our experience of the last 30 years, which is pretty good. So with all difficulty. So I assume we need, as a whole, we need some patience to see the developments and not to try to predict and see how things will develop. Yes, please.
Well,
One more question about Libya.
Oh yeah.
There is some, for Western scholars who consider that the processes started in Libya were greatly, well, one of the reasons for that might have been this Chinese investments for oil-rich regions of Libya, which are basically eastern part of Libya. Could you elaborate on that?
Chinese involvement is not only in Libya, it's all Africa. China controls Africa. If you see the Chinese interest in Turkmenistan with a gas pipeline between Turkmenistan to China, you understand the Chinese system. Now, for example, Chinese controlling all the oil in Sudan. Chinese and Russia are the only supporters of Bashir of Sudan against its own people because of the oil. So it's not only Libya.
in fact, Chinese can mediate well in those areas because of their influence there. The question if they want. I assume that as people in Syria wait and see, and people in Israel wait and see, people in China wait and see, how the new regime will come up. And as long as Gaddafi can supply the goods, they will support him. As long as Bashir of Sudan will survive, they will support him. If not, they support the South. Now, it coming, you're right, the question is, it's a good question, it's because it belongs to the political story. We cannot ignore it. And the whole story started not in Tunisia, but in Sudan. In January, there were referendum about what will be the issue in southern Sudan. And after so many years, finally, the Arab North agreed that the 2/3 of the people on the south, the Christians there, will be independent here. They're supposed to conclude it in July, 9th of July, but now all of a sudden the North said, no, we want the place of the oil that located in the south, we want it back. So the whole issue is under suspicious situation. The Chinese probably will be heavily involved, but we'll wait and see. Now, China cares basically on the interest of China. They're trying not to go too much into depth to political issues. They care about themselves. They will, our ambassador here will tell you, we served in China, when Chinese are asked about, like Russians, we don't care about anything, only about our interest, economical interest. So if, for example, we say to them, what about the nuclear power of Iran? It's nothing. It's harmony, they will be okay, don't worry, because they give them a lot of oil and gas. So I'm really not expecting too much from the Chinese to be involved in Libya. And when will they see that Gaddafi getting weaker, they'll support somebody else. I'm almost sure. Last one?
One last question, unless younger people want to ask. So this is also regarding the pre-World War I time when Britain and French basically handpicked deliberately several kings and assigned them to different territories. So for instance, Prince Faisal from the Hashemite dynasty was handpicked basically to become the king of Iraq, if I remember correctly. And that, as a popular history goes, did not work too well because the dialects were too different actually. So the king could not understand his subjects, if you will. So how much a problem is that in terms of so-called Arab unity, that the language is hardly uniform?
Okay. The Arab unity, or the Arab League, which came into being of the Arab nationalism, is very problematic because it's in decline for at least 2 decades. It's very clear. The Arabism, the Arab collective, it's not unified. For example, in our issues, Egypt going against Syria for a long time is very extreme. About many issues, about Lebanon, they disagree. About Sudan, about other issues, Arab issues, they disagree. I started with the institutions and the changing of regime, and I mentioned Huntington, when the nation state figure is about to be changed in a way, the Arab, as I said, the Arab collective used to be strong till '67. Abdel Nasser, in his war against us, actually lost the Arabism, the Pan-Arabism, because he lost on behalf of the Arabs, not on behalf of Egypt. Now, what happened is that because of the economy, basically from the mid-70s, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the Emirates becoming in a process of emerging richer and more influential, till the point that a small emirate like Qatar, which is basically 160,000 Qataris, that's all the rest are foreign workers, about 800,000. They are tenths in the list of the 10 first producers of oil in the world, tenths of the gas in the world. Only they are so rich, and the balance between Egypt, which is 80 million people leading the Arab world culturally, politically, whatever you like, and Qatar, the small one. Qatar is trying to challenge big Egypt, big sister, and succeeded. Qatar and Bahrain and Dubai and so on, and the balance between the Arabism had changed. Now, the money of Qatar never got to Egypt, or Saudi Arabia sometimes gave the money for Egypt, but the power will move from the traditional Arab collective to a provocative Arab new powers. That's why exactly Qatar decided to have Al Jazeera, to challenge the Arabs, not only us, not only you, to challenge the Arab, to show them that we are small but rich and we can do whatever you want. We are not obeyed to the Arab line. We do whatever we want to do. That is an interesting question, and that's why the whole structure of the Middle East is changing and moving to a different path.
But yet the language differences are not so.
Democratic society. We hope.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.